Women are by nature meant to obey. That's not the kind of sentence you read and just move on from. It lingers, it stings, it provokes. But more importantly, it asks us to pause and ask, what kind of mind produces words like these? The answer is Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most brutally honest philosophers of the 19th century, a man who believed life itself was a prison, love was a trap, and women were nature's most dangerous weapon. Harsh? Absolutely. But he wasn't speaking out of pettiness. He wasn't throwing insults just to shock people. Schopenhauer was trying to uncover the hidden machinery of life, the invisible force he called the will. And in his view, women weren't just people, they were the will's purest, sharpest instrument. They weren't weak, they weren't powerless. They were the very embodiment of nature's drive to survive at all costs. This video is not about canceling him or worshiping him. It's about understanding him. Because whether we like it or not, his message still resonates with countless men today. Men who feel love's illusions, who watch desire destroy clarity, who fear losing themselves in relationships. It won't be comfortable, but Schopenhauer never cared about comfort. He cared about truth, especially the kind most of us would rather look away from. So, welcome to your inner mirror. Today we'll dive into Schopenhauer's message about women, love, and the hidden force behind both. It may not be easy, but it might just be necessary. Schopenhauer didn't write philosophy to make people feel better. He didn't try to comfort. He didn't promise hope. He looked at life without filters, without sugarcoating, and what he saw was something almost unbearable, a universe not ruled by reason, not ruled by morality, but by a blind, relentless force he called the will. Now, when you hear will, you might think of your willpower, your determination to finish a project, to go to the gym, to resist temptation. But that's not what Schopenhauer meant. His will isn't personal. It's not under your control. It's not even fully human. This will is the invisible engine of life itself. It's what makes plants push through the soil towards sunlight. It's what makes animals fight, hunt, mate, and reproduce. It's what makes you crave, desire, want, and then want again. The will doesn't care if you're happy. It doesn't care if you're fulfilled. It doesn't care if you collapse from exhaustion. Its only purpose is one thing: to keep life going. That's why Schopenhauer said humans aren't really free. We think we're making choices. We think we're choosing careers, chasing dreams, falling in love. But beneath every decision, there's something deeper pulling the strings. When you want money, status, or even love, the will is behind it, whispering, survive, reproduce, continue the cycle. It's not romantic. It's not noble. It's biological necessity disguised as freedom. And here's where it gets painful. Schopenhauer argued that the will keeps us trapped in a cycle of endless dissatisfaction. Life, he said, swings like a pendulum between two extremes, pain and boredom. When you want something and don't have it, you suffer. That's pain. You crave it. You feel incomplete. You chase. Then eventually, you get it. For a moment, you feel relief, maybe even joy. But soon enough, the excitement fades. You get used to it. That's boredom. And so you start to want something new. And the cycle repeats. Pain, satisfaction, boredom, desire again. The will doesn't care if this exhausts you. In fact, that's exactly the point. As long as you're desiring, as long as you're chasing, you're helping life continue. You're serving something bigger than yourself, even if you never realize it. Now imagine what this means for love, for relationships, for the bond between men and women. That overwhelming attraction, that obsession, that soulmate feeling, it's not a cosmic miracle. It's not freedom. According to Schopenhauer, it's the will at its most cunning, using you like a pawn to carry out its endless mission. And this is where his most controversial message begins. Because if the will is the hidden force behind life, then women, in his eyes, are the purest, most perfect instrument. Not because they were malicious, not because they consciously plotted against men, but because nature had designed them that way. Their instincts, their emotions, even their bodies, every part of woman, he believed, was shaped to serve one ultimate goal: to protect life and keep it moving forward. While men often lose themselves chasing abstractions, glory, knowledge, honor, power, women, he argued, remain tethered to what is practical, immediate, and essential: survival, security, family, stability. This doesn't mean Schopenhauer saw women as weak, quite the opposite. He believed women held a different kind of power, one that most men underestimated. Not the power of reason or brute strength, but the power of instinct, the power of emotional influence, the power to keep men locked into nature's cycle, whether they realized it or not.
In his eyes, women didn't resist the will. They were the will. They carried it in their biology, their desires, their nurturing, their capacity to give life. Men might rebel against their instincts, try to live for truth or meaning, but women, Schopenhauer thought, lived naturally as protectors of survival. They didn't just obey the will, they embodied it. That's why he described women as closer to nature than men. Their priorities, home, children, care, stability, weren't flaws, but functions. They weren't random choices. They were strategies written into them by life itself. Women, he argued, were the bridge between the blind force of the will and the continuation of the human species. And here's where the message becomes uncomfortable for men. If women are the purest expression of the will, then every attraction you feel, every desire that pulls you toward them, isn't fully yours. It's not freedom. It's not love in the poetic sense. It's the will using her as bait, pulling you into the biological cycle it commands. In Schopenhauer's view, that made woman incredibly powerful, unstoppable even, not by choice, not through conspiracy, but by design. And yet, there was one being, he argued, who had the strange ability to resist this gravitational pull: man. If women, Schopenhauer argued, are nature's perfect instruments driven entirely by the will, then men are something else entirely. Men are the one creatures capable of saying no to the force that controls all life. While women follow instinct naturally, tied to the survival of the species, men have the strange, dangerous ability to step outside the cycle. They can deny their impulses. They can resist desire. They can suffer and act for things with no survival value at all. A man can spend decades writing a book that no one asked for. He can paint a masterpiece the world doesn't understand. He can sacrifice his comfort, his health, even his life, not for food, not for family, but for ideas, meaning, beauty, truth. This, Schopenhauer said, is man's greatest power and his greatest curse. Because once a man realizes he is being pulled by the will, once he sees the invisible strings behind his desires, he begins to question everything. Why do I want this? Is this me? Or is this the will controlling me? That moment of awareness is dangerous. It can free a man from the blind obedience that consumes most creatures. But it also comes with isolation, suffering, and a weight that others cannot understand. In this light, Schopenhauer argued that the battle of life is not just external, it's internal. Within every man are two forces: the instinct-driven will, pulling him towards survival and pleasure, and the thinking self, capable of rising above, capable of pursuing meaning beyond biology. Most men never notice the struggle. Most men drift, carried by desire, unconscious of the forces shaping them. But the man who sees clearly, the man who resists, he becomes something rare. He doesn't merely survive, he creates, he chooses. He becomes dangerous in the most potent sense. Dangerous not because he threatens others, but because he threatens the cycle itself. He threatens the will. He is no longer a puppet, no longer a pawn. He is a thinker, a rebel, a man with purpose. And yet, this freedom comes with a price. Once a man sees the truth behind desire, he suffers differently. He notices how blind most men are, how little control they actually have, how easily life can rob them of clarity. And this awareness doesn't make him popular. It isolates him. It burdens him. And yet, to Schopenhauer, this is the mark of greatness. Not strength, not virility, but the ability to say no. And that no becomes critical when desire enters the picture, especially desire tied to women. Romantic love, the thing society calls the pinnacle of human experience, was to Schopenhauer one of nature's cruelest tricks. He believes it's not a mysterious magic, not a personal choice, not a cosmic reward. It is a biological trap, carefully engineered by the will to ensure reproduction. Every flutter in your chest, every moment of longing, every spark of passion, it's not entirely you. It's the will acting through you, pushing you toward one ultimate goal: continuation of the species.
Think about it. Men are drawn to youth, beauty, softness, not because of personal preference, but because these traits signal fertility. Women are drawn to strength, status, and resources, not because they're materialistic, but because these traits signal a protector, a provider, someone capable of ensuring survival for her children. Every romantic feeling, every "I can't live without you" moment is a cleverly disguised biological command. It feels like freedom, it feels like choice, but Schopenhauer would argue, you're a puppet, and your strings are the desires written into you by nature. And the tragedy? Once the biological goal is achieved, once a child is born, once survival is secured, the passion fades. What once felt like pure love becomes routine, responsibility, survival. The fireworks die down, the magic disappears, and most men never see it coming. Romantic love, in Schopenhauer's eyes, is not about freedom, it's about being used. And most of us fall for it anyway, believing we are choosing, believing we are in control. He didn't sugarcoat this. He didn't wrap it in sentimental warnings. He called it nature's cleverest illusion. A beautiful lie we willingly fall into because the will knows no other way to ensure life goes on. If romantic love is a trap, then marriage, Schopenhauer argued, is the prison built by nature to ensure that trap works. Marriage, in his view, was never truly about love. It was about survival, about the will achieving its goal through the careful orchestration of desire. The woman, often unknowingly, seeks security, protection, and resources. The man believes he is following his heart, that he has found his soulmate, his partner, his ultimate happiness. But Schopenhauer saw it differently. He warned that the man in marriage often surrenders his freedom. His mission, his purpose, his clarity, all of it becomes secondary to the demands of survival. The will doesn't need romance to continue life. It only needs reproduction and security. And marriage, he argued, is the tool that locks men into that service. He didn't see this as villainy on either side. It wasn't manipulation. It was nature, cold and unstoppable. Men enter marriage thinking they're choosing love, but in reality, they're being harnessed by the will to ensure the species survives. The illusion of passion, the poetry of connection, all serve a deeper biological function.
Marriage, Schopenhauer believed, is the ultimate test of whether a man is a servant of the will or a thinker resisting it. Most fail. Most give themselves to desire without realizing it, trading their purpose for fleeting emotion. And the cost? Loss of independence, clarity, and the very self they were born to cultivate. This warning wasn't just philosophical, it was deeply personal. To understand Schopenhauer's harsh views on women, you have to look at the first woman in his life, his mother, Johanna Schopenhauer. Johanna was not a quiet traditional mother. She was a brilliant, independent, and successful writer, respected in German literary circles. She hosted salons, mingled with intellectuals, and lived a life full of conversation, travel, and influence. But to young Arthur, she was distant, cold, and emotionally unavailable. Their relationship was turbulent. Letters flew like weapons, arguments were constant, and resentment simmered beneath every interaction. He saw her as vain and superficial. She saw him as gloomy and difficult, and that emotional chasm never healed. This early wound shaped everything. When Schopenhauer later wrote about women being manipulative, emotionally volatile, or attention-seeking, he wasn't speaking as a detached philosopher. He was speaking as a son who had never received the love he craved. His philosophy on women wasn't just abstract theory, it was a defense mechanism built on pain. When love itself had failed to provide warmth, the easiest way to protect his heart was to declare that women, by nature, are agents of instinct and desire, not affection or reason. So much of what people call misogyny in Schopenhauer's writing may have originated not in hatred, but in fear and heartbreak. He feared women's power over men because he had felt it first in his own formative relationship and had been hurt. Understanding this doesn't excuse the harshness of his words, but it illuminates the human experience behind the philosopher. Behind the cold logic and brutal analysis was a boy struggling to comprehend why the person who should have loved him unconditionally never did. Schopenhauer didn't write about women to make men bitter. He didn't write to incite fear. He wrote to warn, because he saw desire, the very force most men chase, as the ultimate trap.
A man can be disciplined, focused, strong. He can build a life of purpose. He can chase meaning, beauty, truth. He can resist the will and live for something higher than survival itself. And then she appears, not with weapons, not with malice, but with beauty, charm, and desire. And suddenly, all of a man's clarity begins to crumble. He forgets his mission, loses focus, abandons direction, not because he's weak, but because the will uses her to pull him back into its cycle. The tragedy, Schopenhauer said, is not that the man loves, but that he loses himself in that love. His independence, his purpose, his edge, all sacrificed for something that was never truly his. And women, he warned, notice the shift. They cannot deeply respect a man who no longer has his center, who no longer has a life apart from them. Respect fades, attraction wanes, and the man is left weaker, adrift, lost in the illusion that love was his own choice. This is the essence of Schopenhauer's warning. Desire is not always your truth. Sometimes it's the will manipulating you, using you to perpetuate life, not to fulfill your freedom. This doesn't mean you should hate women. It doesn't mean you should avoid love. It means you must know yourself, guard your purpose, and never sacrifice your mission for a fleeting feeling. A woman can walk beside you, even inspire you, but she should never become your destination. Inside every man, Schopenhauer believed, are two forces: the animal driven by desire and the thinker capable of purpose. Most men are unaware of this struggle. Most men think they are free. But those who see the truth, the ones who resist, gain something rare, real freedom. Freedom not from love, but from being blindly controlled by it. So here is the final message.
Never blindly trust your strongest emotions. Ask yourself, are these feelings truly mine, or is something deeper controlling me? Schopenhauer's words are cold, uncompromising, sometimes painful, but they are also honest. And in that honesty lies their power. If this message resonates, don't just nod. Look inside. Examine your desires. Examine your choices. Because in understanding the will, you may discover something more important than love itself. The freedom to be your own man, fully aware, fully alive, and unbound by the illusions of desire.